Hello everybody and welcome to another Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we're taking a look at the Lich Lord, a Necromancer magicka DPS build for more in-game centric type play. This is not, again, meta. This is more of a in-game centric type build, so this is something you can use to play it in-game if you want to. It's up to you. It's pretty much whatever you see it as. So but let's go ahead and get started by jumping in and looking at the build. So we are a High Elf Necromancer with this. Now High Elf is going to be the best choice for this because of their increased max magicka. Breton is also good. Dark Elf, good. Argonian can be good for this as well, depending on how you play. But there's a lot of choices here, so... let's go ahead and get started in stats. 33k max magicka, 21k health, 12k max stamina, and as you can see we have a 1357 mag recovery, 585 stamina recovery, 321 health recovery, and then our spell damage is coming in at 2463, 55% spell crit, a 1535 weapon damage, 29% weapon critical. Not too bad, not too shabby. Our spell resist is 13, and we need to fix that real quick. So I'm just going to jump over here and go ahead and lower this some. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's see what happens. Perfect. So 1435 spell resist with a 14,000 physical resistance. We do have Minor Slayer at all times. We do use the Thief Mundus Stone. And we have Major Prophecy and Minor Slayer at all times, of course. And then we are using Witch Mother's Potent Brew. You can use Clockwork Citrus Fillet as the other food source. That'll give you mag recovery, health recovery. It does give you minor magicka and max magicka and max stamina. Along with the Witch Mother's Potent Brew, you see it does pretty much the same, except it doesn't give you health recovery. And then the the Clockwork Citrus Fillet does give you a little bit more magicka and max health, and a little bit more mag recovery. Moving on now to our equipment, starting with our potions and stuff. Tri-Stat pots and Longfin Pasty Melon Sauce for when you're solo playing, like doing overland stuff, doing delves, public dungeons, world bosses, or soloing dungeons even. Tri-Stat food with tripods is going to be your best option. And then for your other stuff, the spell power pots or stamina or magicka power pots on the live servers, this gives you max magicka, mag recovery, or major intellect, major sorcery, major prophecy, all that stuff. You're just going to want to use the same potions that you can craft on live. Works out really good. And then Witch Mother's Potent Brew, like I said. Alright, going over the sets that we're running. Starting with the first set, our monster set, we are using Nearnets. Nearnets is an awesome set for this. So the one piece adds max health. The two piece, when you deal direct damage, you have a 10% chance to summon a Lich Crystal that explodes after 2 seconds, dealing 11,528 magic damage to all enemies within 4 meters, and it can happen every 3 seconds. So this can go off quite a bit if you're really good with your rotation. Moving on to the next set, we are using the False Gods set. Now this isn't the perfected set, this is just the False Gods, the normal set that drops in normal content. So you can get this pretty easily. The 2-piece adds spell crit, 3-piece minor slayer, 4-piece spell crit, 5-piece spell damage, and then the other 5-piece bonus, reduce the cost of magic abilities by 8%. When you kill an enemy, you restore 2150 magicka and gain major expedition for 8 seconds, increasing your movement speed by 30%. And then moving on to the jewelry set we are running the willpower set. With this, you get a 2-piece bonus of max magicka, just lots of max magicka, and then you get 193 spell damage for the 3-piece. This is just a really good kind of universal set that anyone can get. It drops in dungeons on doing the random dungeon dailies. You can get this set, and it usually drops with either health, stamina, or magicka on it, and you can change those to what you want. And then we are using a Asylum Ice Staff. Now you don't have to use an Ice Staff, you can use a Fire Staff. I just prefer Ice Staff. It looks really cool with the Necro thing, and it's something I prefer. And the reason for the Asylum Staff is every third cast of Force Shock will always apply Burning, Concussed, and Shield status effects. The Force Shock casts must be made within 10 seconds of each other for this effect to occur. You will be doing this Force Shock with within your rotation, because it's going to be your primary spammable. And then the next weapon we are using is a Maelstrom Staff. Now, if you can't get a Maelstrom Staff, do not stress it, okay? It is not a necessity. You can use a crafted staff until you can get a Maelstrom Staff, but this is really nice. The 2-piece bonus, your light and heavy attacks deal additional damage to enemies in your wall of elements. So even if you set a wall of elements on your back bar, on the front bar, you're still going to get that light attack damage increase. Alright, so going over the traits and enchants, starting with the monster set trait, or the helm trait and enchant, we are using reinforced, and this is a heavy piece, so you want that heavy armor here, so you get that higher resistance value. And heavy armor is going to give you the greatest amount of resistances on the chest piece, or on the helm. So do that, because your monster set, you're going to be getting helm, heavy, medium, shoulders. So this reinforced, this is going to increase your armor resistance, and we are using tri-stat enchants. A lot of people don't realize how tri-stats can really affect your gameplay, because they do give you more resources for blocking, dodge rolling, and everything else. But the other reason why we use an ice staff for this is because if you do block with the ice staff, you get that it costs magicka instead of stamina. Alright, moving on now to the chest, we are using an infused tri-stat, and the reason for infused is to maximize the tri-stat resources, how much you get back in health, magic, and stamina. This is going to give you greater control in your stats, and greater, of course, stat values. We're also using infused on the leggings as well, and the tri-stats again to maximize those pools. On the smaller pieces, we are using divines, max magic, and like I said, the shoulders are going to be medium. The helm, helm and shoulders heavy and medium, and then the rest of it's all going to be light. And then the small pieces, of course, all max magicka and divines, and that's to maximize your Mundus Stone use and to maximize your magicka pool. Going on to the jewelry, we are using 2 Trirune. This is to maximize your attributes. Again, if you can't get Trirune, do 1 healthy, 1 and 1 max magicka, because that'll work out to your advantage. And then the other one you can do as we have it. So Trirune with spell damage enchants. Spell damage enchants maximize your spell damage period. And then the last piece, the necklace, is Bloodthirsty with a mag recovery. Now, again, a lot of people ask me, why do you go Bloodthirsty with a mag recovery? The mag recovery is there so you have resource management. One of the things you do not want to not have in in-game is good resource management. And this is going to allow you to have good resource management in case you don't have synergies to pull resources from. You still want to have that good resource management, so that's why we have mag recovery here. And the Bloodthirsty is to increase your damage against enemies under 25% health by 10%. Alright, moving on to the Asylum Staff. We are using an Nirnhoned Asylum Staff with an Absorb Magicka. Every 4 seconds or 5 seconds you're going to be getting Magicka back, and you're going to deal Magicka damage. The reason I like this setup, especially on an Ice Staff combination, is because the Ice Staff, you can get that shield. You get a greater chance of shielding Kakasta, and this really plays well into that, and I love that kind of combo. So, moving on to the Maelstrom Staff, we are using infused with a weapon spell damage enchant. That's pretty common, and that is our gear setup. Now we're going to move on to skills. And going through our skills, starting with our skills we have on our bar, starting with the first ability, we do have Crushing Shock. Now, Crushing Shock, I like to use, a lot of people like to use Force Pulse. I like to use Crushing Shock because it does deal all 3 types of damage type, Flame, Frost, Shock, and Flame, Frost, and Shock damage. But then on top of that, any enemy that's casting an ability will be interrupted, set off balance, and stunned for 3 seconds. So I really like using it for that purpose. The next ability we have is called Stalking Blast Bones. Now this thing sends a skeleton out that explodes, deals fire damage to all enemies nearby. It has a chance of setting them on fire, which is really nice. And then every second the skeleton spins chasing the target, the damage it gets grows by 10% to a maximum of 50%. And it will create a corpse on death. Then we have our Ricochet Skull. This just deals flame damage. Now you can use either ability. I prefer using Force Shock as my spammable. This is really nice because every 3rd cast is considered, it will deal 20% more damage, and then the skull will ricochet. but I like using it in my rotation because like every time I do a third rotation it's going to ricochet, so, and get that 20% more damage. Next ability is Mystic Siphon. This is really great. This deals shock damage over 12 seconds to all enemies in the area, and it creates a line between you and the enemy. Wherever that line is, it will deal damage as well. And you restore magicka over 12 seconds, which is kind of nice. And then while slotted, you get 3% more damage done. Next ability we have is Inner Light. You don't have to use Inner Light. I like using it because it increases my max magicka by 5%, and it gives me Major Prophecy, increasing my spell critical by 2191. Last ability we have is our ultimate, and that is Glacial Colossus. Now this will hit 3 times, dealing X amount of frost damage each hit. The final hit stuns all enemies for 4 seconds. I really like that. And then each smash applies major vulnerability to enemies hit for 3 seconds, increasing the damage taken by 30%. Now remember, each smash applies the major vulnerability, so that means every smash will reapply the 3 seconds. So when you get to the third smash, you have 5 seconds in total of major vulnerability. Swapping to the back bar, first ability we have is Blockade of Storms. This does shock damage, and because of the front bar, us using the Asylum Staff, and the back bar we're using the Maelstrom Staff, we're going to get off balance quite a bit, because we're going to be able to concuss a lot of enemies with that force shock. So this is really good to keep that uptime of off balance. Next ability we have is Unnerving Boneyard. Of course we have this because this does Major Breach and Major Fracture. It really helps out with group play, especially in trash fights. It does frost damage over 10 seconds. It applies that Major Breach and Major Fracture, and it does that. On top of that, if it consumes a corpse, it will do more damage, 50% more, and it's also a great synergy. Next ability we have is called Skeletal Arcanist. This one, you summon a skeleton who fights by your side for 16 seconds. Every 2 seconds he casts shock damage to enemies, and it hits one target and then it spreads to other enemies. So it's an AoE shock damage ability. And it does create a corpse on death. Next ability you have, and this is optional guys, you don't have to use this ability. I like it because it reduces enemy movement speed by 50% for 5 seconds, and it applies Minor Maim for 5 seconds, reducing damage done by 15%. And then each patch can immobilize targets for 4 seconds. So this is a great CC, crowd control ability, along with the other abilities you have, like the concussed, and to set them off balance, and chilled from the ice thing. So it's really good overall. Next ability we have is Inner Light, of course. We want to have this on the back bar as well to increase our max magicka and give us that Major Prophecy. And then the last ability we have, our ultimate, is Thunderous Rage. Now this one, you create a cataclysmic storm at the target's location that builds down for 2 seconds and lays waste to all enemies in the area, dealing X amount of shock damage every second for 7 seconds. And the ability lasts 2 seconds longer if you're using a lightning staff. So we are using a lightning staff. And that is our abilities. Now I'm going to go over the abilities I have for the class unlocked. So I have Glacial Colossus, Ricochet Skull, Stalking Blastbones, Unnerving Boneyard, Skeletal Arcanist, and Mystic Siphon, plus all the passives here under Grave Lord. Bone Tyrant, I have Ravenous Goliath, Hungry Scythe, Summoner's Armor, Necrotic Potency, Remote Totem, and of course Ghostly Embrace, and then of course all the passives here. Moving on to Living Death, I have Animated Blastbones, Resistant Flesh, Expunge and Modify, Renewing Undeath, Intensive Mender, and Braided Tether, along with all the passives. Now, the reason I unlock all the class skills and passives is so if I want to play a different role, maybe if I'm playing in a 4-man group, and let's say I'm playing with a guild group and we don't have a healer, I can always switch over to playing a healer, and I have the ability to do so because of this. Also, if I want to be a tank for some normal dungeons or maybe even some veteran base game dungeons, I can switch over to that. And also, if I'm solo playing, I like to use other abilities. Weapon skills, we primarily use and only use Destruction Staff, so Elemental Rage, Crushing Shock, Elemental Blockade, Destructive Reach, Elemental Drain, and Pulsar are the abilities we do have unlocked here, and then we have all the passives. Moving on to Light Armor, we're going to take all the Light Armor passives, because this is a Light Armor build, and we are going to use Harness Magicka as a shield if we need one. So like if I'm tanking, I will use Harness Magicka. Medium Armor, top 2 and the bottom one, And then heavy armor, the top 3. When it comes to world skills, soul magic, you can also be a vampire with this, which is really powerful, by the way. Because it gives you 10% more mag recovery, and then it gives you some other passive stuff, which is kind of nice. But soul assault from soul magic, consuming traps, soul shatter, soul summons, and soul leech, or soul lock, of course. And then on to the Fighter's Guild. A lot of people are going to be wondering why I unlocked the Fighter's Guild abilities. Fighter's Guild has some great CCs, and some of it can be used in group play, whether you're playing like a healer, you want that ring of preservation, give that minor protection, minor endurance, and that heal. And you can adjust this by using Tri-Stat Food. So, Silver Shards is just a good AoE, and Dawnbreaker's Smiting is a great CC. I love using this in PvP, so I will use that on the back bar. Lightweight Beast Trap is a good way to get minor force. So, and then of course all the passives. Mage's Guild, all the passives, and then I do take Ice Comet, Inner Light, Degeneration, Volcanic Ruin, and Spell Symmetry. Psijic Order, Precognition, Borrowed Time, Elemental Weapon, Channeled Acceleration, Min Spirit, and Deep Thoughts are the things I take, and I take the passives, of course, so I can get advantage of those. Undaunted, Sanguine Altar, Shadow Silk, Inner Rage, Bone Surge, Mystic Orb, and then the 2 Undaunted passives. I will use the Mystic Orb even when if I'm playing a DPS type build sometimes, because it's a nice way to give synergies and do damage. Alliance War, Aggressive Horn, Resolving Vigor, and Razor Caltrops. Again, this is more for solo type play. Or if I'm playing more, like if I want to switch out my front bar weapon to, like, say, a Maelstrom two-handed, or a Master's two-handed, or even a Asylum or Black Rose Prison two-handed, I can. And then I can use some of this stuff on the front bar, and I can go more physical kind of DPS with magicka as well, so. Support, Replenishing Barrier, Cleanse, and Mystic Guard plus Magic Aid. If I'm playing a healer, I will use some of these abilities. And then, of course, our racials, Half Elf. The Spell Recharge, this is okay. You don't really need it. It's that bottom one you want. When using an ability with a channel or cast time, you take 5% less damage. This is really good if you're playing a healer. Searbane's Boon, increase max magicka by 2,000. And then Elemental Talent increases your spell damage by 258. Moving on to Alchemy, Medicinal Use, and Provisioning, Gourmand, and Connoisseur. These are long-term ones. You're going to want to get those over the long term. Now that I've shown you guys that, we're going to go take a look at our champion points. And you guys already saw some of the setup, but we're going to go over it anyways. 56 in Ironclad. This reduces damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. 10 into Spell Shield. This increases spell resistance by 1,000. Moving on, we have 28 in Light Armor Focus. This increases physical resistance by 2542 for 5 or more pieces of light armor worn. We have 31 into Thick Skin, reducing damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. 43 into Hardy, and reduces damage taken from physical poison disease damage by 10%. And 43 into Elemental Defender, reducing damage taken from Flame, Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 10%. Moving on over here, we have 40 into Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. And 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing healing received by 5%. Moving on over here, we have 40 into Warlord, reducing the break free cost by 16%, 16 into Sprinter, reducing sprint cost by 10%, and 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing bash cost by 10%. Moving on to the middle green, we have 43 into Mooncalf. This increases stam recovery by 10%. A lot of people are going to say, why not Tenacity? And to be honest, Tenacity gives you an extra 10% with 43 points. And it's okay, but it really isn't going to make a huge difference with the amount, how little you already get back. So if you're using a Resto Staff, it's better to go into Tenacity. But if you're not, or if you're in heavy armor, one of those two, then you want to build into Tenacity. But if you're not, then you want to build into the other resource. The reason I say that is because you never know. Like, Stam recovery always plays well into any build, especially when you're playing solo and you need resources, you know, for different abilities you might be using, whether magic or stamina. So I like to build for recovery. Moving on, 40 into Tumbling. This reduces dodge roll cost by 16%, and 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing block cost by 16%. And then moving on to the middle here, the blue tree, we have 43 into Blast, increasing healing done by 10%, 56 into Elfhorn, increasing critical damage and critical healing with magic abilities by 20%, 56 into Elemental Expert, increasing Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 12%. And then moving on over here, we have 35 in a Staff Expert. This increases your light and heavy attacks with Destruction Styles by 20%. And then 40 in the Master at Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. And then we have 40 into Thaumaturge. This is going to increase your damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. Right. Now that I've shown you guys that, we're going to do two parses. We're going to do a parse on this little guy here. This is going to represent what our damage would look like in a dungeon and small group play. And then we're going to go fight the big guy over there, and that's going to represent our dungeon or our damage in a trial perfected group. So let's go ahead and get started. We're probably not going to do a whole lot of damage depending on the rotation and how well I can keep it up. Okay, so about 26k. We're getting about 27, but we did have a few issues. I'm going to go ahead and parse on the big guy now after the potion resets. And then I'll show you guys what this looks like. So this way you guys can see what all of it will look like. So potion. And synergy, of course. Oops, the wrong ability. But as you can see, we can keep a steady 37, 38k. If you're really good, you can get to about 45. And if you're using a Fire Staff, actually you can get more DPS out of it. I just like the Ice Staff because to me, Ice Staff's just more fun. No offense to anyone. So let's go ahead and get out of combat. We'll take a look at our combat results through our combat metrics. There we go, we're out of combat. Now we're going to take a look at the combat metrics here. As you can see on the big guy, we get to about 4124 spell damage with 61% spell crit, 85% critical damage, and it says 6,000 something spell penetration, but it's actually a lot more. It's just that the big target skeleton actually gives you 100% penetration value because of all the different things that you'd be getting from a group. But as you can see, some of our damage here is just ridiculous. Our Stalking Blast Bones is like 40k, our Colossus is 40k, Ricochet Scrolls hitting for about 23, Ricochet, and it just depends, but it does all different kinds of damage. And then our Force Shock actually does a lot of damage there, and our light attacks does a really insane amount of damage depending on what you're using. If you're using an Ice Staff, Fire Staff, it's going to do a lot of damage on the front bar. So Blockade of Storms doesn't do too bad of damage over time, but yeah, it's just this build is actually really good for, like, I like this build for small group play and also in-game play, especially if you want somebody who can bring some CC and crowd control along with some damage. This is definitely the one to bring. So, but that is it, my friends, for this build. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.